Have you ever really stopped and thought about the news you scroll through every single day? I mean, it seems simple enough, right? Something happens, a reporter writes about it, and bam, it's on your phone. But it turns out behind that screen is this whole complex world of choices, pressures, and filters. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and see how the news is maybe less of a perfect mirror of reality and more of a carefully constructed piece of art.
And that really gets to the heart of the big question we're tackling. When you're consuming the news, are you looking through a crystal clear window at what's happening? Or are you actually looking at a painting, a version of reality that's been carefully composed, with certain things highlighted and other things left out entirely? As you're about to see, the answer is, well, it's pretty complicated.
Okay, so to get started, we've got to look at the foundation. I like to call it the unseen blueprint. These are all the practical, technical, real-world rules and limitations that shape the news before a single word even gets written.
Just think about how all these things crash into each other. You've got a newsroom with a super tight budget, so maybe they can't send a reporter to a breaking story. So what do? They have to rely on wire services. Then that story has to look good on a tiny mobile screen, which means, shorter sentences, punchier headlines, more pictures. And behind all of that, the company that owns the newsroom might subtly push for certain stories over others. It's this giant machine where every single gear has an effect on the final product. And that leads us right to the power of who owns the place. Now, this isn't usually some big, shady conspiracy. It's often much more subtle. But think about it. If your news outlet is just one small part of a massive corporation that also has, say, tech interests or real estate interests, well, stories that are critical of those things might just get pushed to the back burner, while stories that make them look good get the five-star treatment.
So, you've got this practical blueprint in place. Now, let's stack another layer right on top of it, the ideological filter. This is where all the unspoken values, the cultural beliefs, and the politics of the people actually making the news start to color what you end up seeing.
You see, news is never created in a total vacuum. It's a product of the world it lives in. It reflects the dominant ideas of its owners, its advertisers, and just society in general. And that influence is what really shapes our shared idea of what's normal, what's important, and even what's considered controversial. And this creates this huge tension, really right at the heart of journalism. On one side, you have the classic ideal of objectivity, just the facts, ma'am, presented as neutrally as possible. But on the other side, you've got this growing trend of advocacy journalism, which is all about using the news to push for a specific cause. And pretty much every newsroom out there is trying to figure out how to navigate that divide. All right, so we've got the blueprint and we've got the filter. But who actually puts them to use? Well, that brings us to the key players in this whole drama, the journalists and the editors. They are the ones I like to call the gatekeepers and the framers, and they have two incredibly powerful tools they use to shape the story you get. So here's a quick look at how some random event in the world becomes a story. First, out of literally thousands of things that happen every single day, editors have to pick just a handful that they think are newsworthy. And at every single step of this process, a person is making a choice, a subjective decision about what part of reality you get to see and what parts just stay invisible. The first big tool they use is something called gatekeeping. The best way to think about this is like a bouncer at a super exclusive club. It's their job to decide who gets in the door and who gets left out on the street. For every single story that makes it into the news, you gotta believe there are hundreds, maybe thousands, that got turned away at the velvet rope. Okay, so once a story gets past the bouncer, the second tool kicks in, framing. If gatekeeping is the bouncer, framing is the interior designer. Framing decides the lighting, the kind of music that's playing, the angle of the photos, the exact words in the headline. It's all about presentation, and it has a massive impact on how you feel about that story. So if you remember one thing, let it be this. Gatekeeping is about the what stories get told, and framing is about the how those stories get told. One is selection, the other is presentation. You have to understand both to really get how the news is built.
But wait a minute, who's paying for the bouncer and the interior designer? Well, that leads us to maybe the single biggest influence of them all, the force that powers this entire industry: money. We have to ask the classic question, who benefits financially from the news we see every day?
Because at the end of the day, most news organizations are businesses, plain and simple. They need eyeballs, they need clicks, they need an audience to make money from ads or subscriptions. And that commercial pressure can create a huge incentive for sensationalism. You've all heard the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. Well, there's a reason for that. Shocking, emotional, or scary stories just get more engagement.
And let's put some hard numbers on this so you can really feel the scale. First up, concentration. A staggering 80% of the entire media landscape is controlled by just a few huge private corporations. That is an immense amount of power and influence in a very, very small number of hands.
Next, let's talk dependency. For the average news organization, something like 90% of their money comes directly from advertisers. This gives those advertisers a ton of indirect power. I mean, just ask yourself, is a newsroom really going to rush to publish a damaging story about their number one advertiser? And finally, there's just the sheer scale of it all. We're talking about a global industry worth well over $100 billion. When that kind of money is on the line, the pressure to protect your financial interests, sometimes even over your journalistic ones, can be absolutely overwhelming.
And of course, wherever you find that much money, you are gonna find politics. This whole financial system has a direct impact on the political world. It helps decide which stories get amplified, which politicians get friendly coverage, and which issues end up dominating the national conversation. The media isn't just a referee watching the political game. It's one of the most powerful players on the field.
So there you have it. We've pulled back the curtain. The news isn't some simple window on the world. It's a product, it's assembled using a practical blueprint, it's run through an ideological filter, it's carefully shaped by gatekeepers and framers, and the whole thing is paid for by massive commercial interests. We've just given you the recipe. The only question left is, now that you know how the menu is made, how are you going to read it?